So now that we have finished the poster design and you've exported as a proper print file with pre-flight, we're going to go ahead and do a version of that as a digital file. I've worked on productions before, concerts, theater productions, all these kinds of things work like this. They have a main poster file, and then they have a whole slew of digital files and alternate sizes, but we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to do one digital file. So this would be for Eventbrite. This is so that when they list their event on Eventbrite, they will have an ad above the listing. So this is the size 2160 by 1080. It should be a JPEG, which means it's going to be exported, and the file should be no larger than 10 megabytes. So this is a much simpler file. This is digital, and this is what I'm looking for here. I want you to get that file size right. I want the layout to be well arranged because this is a completely different format. Now this is horizontal, so you have to rethink some things. I want this to be a proper digital file, which means there should be no trim marks, no bleed, nothing like that. And the information needs to be readable so that it doesn't get too small or become difficult to understand. So let's take a look at this process real quick. I have the poster. Now I want to create this digital file. Sometimes you can put all these in the same file by giving them all pages, but I'm not going to do that in this case because a print file like this might go to the printer with the actual InDesign file package. And so I don't want a digital file sitting in there. So I'm going to make a new file for this digital ad. And when I open the new document panel, you can see at the very top there's print, web, and mobile. Now when we use print, you can go down here and see that it's in inches and there's a margin. If you change this to web, suddenly now everything is in pixels. All digital work is measured in pixels. So if you start a document as a web or a mobile, it's going to automatically have the whole document in pixels, which is a good thing because that's how we're being asked to put this together. With it in web mode, I'm going to put the width at 2160 and the height, I don't have to put pixels because it's already using that measurement, and the height at 1080. This is also known as a 2-to-1 ratio. We only need one page, one column. As far as the margins, you technically don't need a margin. You can take everything right up to the edge on a digital file because there's no trimming. But of course, to organize your space and have consistency, it is nice to have a margin. So I'm just going to leave that there for right now, and we'll see what becomes of it. Now let's go grab all our graphics. You could say Command A and then Command C for copy. And then when you drop that into this file, it's all sitting there and you can resize it. So the first thing, of course, I'd start with is the background. You can take the background off the side if you want, but you don't need to. It won't show up beyond the edge of this digital file. Then as far as taking a vertical layout like this and turning it into a horizontal layout, it's a little bit tricky, but I always use columns to kind of help me out. So if you go up here to margins and columns, you can change that margin if you want. So you could give yourself more space along the edge or less, but you can also give yourself columns. And I'm going to give myself lots of columns and an odd number. That kind of keeps things from being too centered. It'll either be 3 and 4 or 5 and 2 or 6 and 1, some kind of ratio. So I'm going to go 7 columns across, 12 pixel gutter, and say okay. And so that helps me a little bit. I'm going to take my visual, bring it over here. I'm going to do a power scale so it gets the container and the visual. Means I'm going to go Shift Command and then drag it out. So that kind of puts him over here. I'm going to let him kind of be centered within this 3-column space and see if I can get him a little larger. Yeah, that looks good. Now for the type, I can use these 4 columns. So then the ratio is 4:3. So that's good. Just grab all your text boxes, hold them up to the edge of that column, hold Shift and Command, and it will make all that type kind of stay stacked the way it is, but it will get larger. All of it will get larger. And then it's just a matter of rearranging things to stay inside that margin and kind of line up, getting a clean layout. Okay, so we end up with something like this. Looks good, right? Should we do a pre-flight on this? Yes. So let's go see what we have here now. We have one error, but what pre-flight are we running? The basic working pre-flight. So what that's telling me is I have overset text. Overset text on the first text frame. So when I click that, it shows me it's this one. This is what overset text means. That means that while I was whipping around all this type trying to get it to fit, I made this container too small and it bumped out the copy. And if you don't think this is important, wait till your client tells you that you forgot to put the most important information on there because it fell off. And you wouldn't really know. It does give you a little red box right here, but sometimes you could miss that. So that's overset text. And of course, that should always be on your pre-flight. But there's a couple of the things that I happen to know are wrong with this file, and it's not catching them. So let's make another profile. And let's call this one digital. Okay, so the first is links missing or modified, always. If you have a link and it's missing, it's going to go very low bitmap. We still don't really need URL links here. We're going to export as a JPEG, so it will go RGB. Image resolution, now in this particular case, we don't want it to go beyond 72 dpi technically is fine for digital, so we're going to put everything has to be at least 72 dpi. Here's another thing we want on this, right? Non-proportional scaling of placed object. We definitely don't want to be squishing or extending our objects, our images. It can be done accidentally, and then you're going to see it when it's printed or when the ad is running and the client's going to say, why is our logo look so wide or something like that. So you got to make sure that's on. Overset text for sure. I just explained that one. Overrides I wouldn't worry about. We don't need any bleed and page setup, so that should do it. And let's see if we have any problems now. I'm going to change it to digital. We have an error. What is our error? Images and objects. Non-proportional scaling. This image got non-proportional scaling. So let's look at it and see. 64 in the container is that. But the image, 140 wide by 146 high. So all we have to do is click this link, which will keep our proportions constrained. So now there are no errors on our file. So you still want to keep a pre-flight going, and it's not going to be the same for print as it would be for digital. So now that we know that this has passed, it says no errors. All we have to do is export this as a JPEG. And the naming convention is your first initial, last name, .eventbrite. We want to use that as a JPEG. And then here, resolution, let's keep that at 72 dpi. The art and our color space should be RGB. Export that and then hand that in, and that is your digital file